Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Today on Oklahoma Gardening, host Casey Hentges looks at some fun mint varieties and has tips for keeping them welcome in your garden. At Pond Pro Shop in Shawnee, Oklahoma, we find out how to create a pondless waterfall. We visit a research project looking at tomato diseases, and Barbara Brown adds some pizzazz to a dull pizza.
With over 600 different types of mints, it's no wonder it's so readily used as a flavoring in many of our dishes and drinks. Now, I bet as most gardeners, we've just begun to scratch the surface of what type of mint we grow in the garden. This here is an apple mint, which has the flavor of apple in it. It makes a really nice addition to whether it's ice water or chopped over a fresh salad or even fresh fruit. Now you can see the leaves of the apple mint are a little bit more ruffled and have some hair on them. And so for this reason, sometimes it's called the fuzzy mint or the woolly mint. Another mint that is fruity also and related to the apple mint is the pineapple mint. You can see here it has a very similar rough textured leaf as the apple mint, and that's because it is a cultivar of the apple mint. You can see the pineapple mint has a nice yellow or cream colored variegation to it on the margins of the leaves. And if you do see it reverting back to the true green leaf, you want to go ahead and pinch that out, because what that is doing is it's reverting back to the apple mint. So in order to maintain the true pineapple mint, take out anything that might be pure green leaves like that. Pineapple mint is also a nice addition to any adult drink that you might not have that famous mojito mint to add into. Now, if you're looking for something a little bit sweeter, you might try a cotton candy mint or our delicious chocolate mint for a nice dessert. Now, with so many different mints, you've got to keep in mind that they can be a garden bully. They are a perennial, so they'll come back every year, but they tend to be aggressive, especially in moist soils. So you want to make sure to probably plant them in a container, or plant them in a container, but leave about a 1-inch lip exposed up out of the soil. That way it can look like it's in the garden, but it can control it a little bit better. Also, if you're planting more than one type of mint, make sure to put them at opposite ends of the garden, because they can easily cross-pollinate, and over time you can lose the integrity of the flavor and the aroma. With so many different mints to choose from, it's easy to customize for your garden as well as your cooking. Today we're back at one of my favorite places to be, especially in the summertime. We're at Pond Pro down in Shawnee, and joining us is Mike Miller, who is the pond expert. And Mike, we want to talk a little bit today about pondless waterfalls and why somebody might look at doing those and some of the factors to consider. We've got one right here we can take a look at.
This is the first one in our yard, Casey, and we call them disappearing waterfalls. We call them pondless waterfalls.
Okay.
And what that simply means is that we've got a waterfall and a stream, but there's no pond at the bottom.
Excellent. So what goes into this? What do we need to consider as far as the size and the flow and that sort of stuff?
At the top of each waterfall, we're going to have what we call a weir, W-E-I-R.
Okay.
And that's simply an opening for the waterfall, for the water to come out of and start. And that's really the beginning point of the waterfall. And then as it comes down at the bottom, we have a big basin that we've dug in the ground. We fill it up with a plastic box, looks kind of like a big egg crate or milk carton that only displaces 5% of the water.
Okay.
So we can make that vault smaller and still contain as much water as we need.
So it holds the water, but yet it's able to hold the rocks
That's
up
right.
above
Those,
as well. Okay.
Those plastic boxes are very strong. They'll
Okay.
hold up to 15,000 pounds.
Okay.
So there's no fear of somebody walking across this and falling in.
Oh, okay.
It's not going to happen. Then we've got all of the rocks on top of it, but if we needed to service our pump, which is down in there, we could get to the pump, service it, clean it, or change it out if it goes out, and that's the only really mechanical part on all of this. And the pipe comes around and pumps the water back up to the top.
Okay.
So a couple of things you need to consider is how large does the basin need to be, and we've determined that 3 times the volume of water in your stream is sufficient to fill up the pipe, fill up the stream, and allow it to flow down and fall back into the basin and still leave enough to cover the pump.
Okay.
And that's the important consideration, is that we've got to have enough water in there to cover that pump, or the electronics that are at the top are going to eventually heat up and turn off.
Right.
And now you've got to replace the pump, and that's the expensive part.
And I would imagine you get different sounds with the,
Oh, yeah.
whether it's a lazy creek or a tall waterfall.
Water only makes 3 sounds. One is water falling into water, and that's the deepest and loudest sound that it makes. The next one is water falling onto rocks, and that's a splashing sound. That's a little less low, it's a little higher pitched, and that's where the splash sound comes from that we all are familiar with. And then the last one is water running across rocks, and that is the least amount of sound.
Okay.
We think that you should design your waterfall to have all 3 of those sounds. Otherwise, your brain is going to block it out as white noise.
Okay. And as we're standing here, I mean, you've got a nice flow. I noticed the water is being diverted in different directions. How do you do that? Is that just a matter of putting the rocks in there? I'm sure it's a little more complicated than that.
Well, no, it really is pretty simple,
Okay.
but you have to understand what happens. Water only changes directions for one of 2 reasons. One is an immovable object, like one of those big rocks, and 2 is a change in elevation.
Oh, okay.
If I change the side. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So here we've set the weir at an angle, assuming that our point of perspective is over here. That's where most people who come in this gate are going to first see this waterfall. So that's the perspective we want. We want to see the water coming out as it goes down. But we didn't want just a wide, 36-inch wide flow of water coming out, so we put this big rock here. And this rock makes a channel here. Narrower water gets deeper, wider water gets shallower. We've got more water over here on the side, on this side over here, and then that was too much flow coming down here, so we set this big rock in its place. We laid this old dead tree down. It's got to turn and go this way, because not only did I put an immovable object there, but I raised the elevation too, so that it comes this way. Now, here's a simple way to fill in a lot of space all along your waterfall, simply by raising the rubber liner up and poking dirt underneath it, so that you've changed the height here and the water is forced to go this way and not flow out here into the yard. So then the rest of these rocks we pretty much added just to add interest to it, where if you make water wide, remember it's shallower and it appears to be slower. It's moving at the same volume. But if I pinch it together between these 2 rocks, then it is deeper and it looks to be faster.
So it kind of makes rapids, if you will.
That's right, whitewater rapids.
Yeah.
And we've got, our largest one shows that, where you can narrow it down and it really churns up some whitewater as you go through. I'm going to try and get out of here without falling in.
So when we get down here to the bottom where the reservoir is, how do you make it just not fall into the reservoir?
Well, that's the magic, and normally I make folks come to class to learn the magic, but I'll give you the secret
Oh, okay,
today.
just me, right?
Okay, yeah, exactly. Nobody else can hear this. So, if you're right that the water would come down, follow the liner, and fall into the pit, the basin right there at the edge, right along there, and then it would fill up the basin and the pump would get it and start over again. But meanwhile, these rocks are all dry.
Right.
So you don't have a disappearing waterfall. What you have is a waterfall and stream with a pond of dry rocks at the bottom.
Right, because the water would fall right into the
That
basin.
doesn't look very good, we don't think. So what we do is use a scrap piece of the rubber liner that goes underneath. We start right up here at the top, somewhere in here above the basin, and lay it down on the rubber, cover it with rocks, and let it come down across those plastic boxes we talked about, down into here, and then we cover the whole thing with rocks so you can't see any of it.
And it doesn't matter where that plastic ends, or
I don't care.
and it's not adhered to
Some of it
anything?
comes clear here, some of it runs out there. This runs out over here.
Okay.
There's still vault underneath here,
Okay.
but no water's getting in it. That's
Right.
okay. I don't mind that much dry rock down at the bottom, but I want it to look like it's a disappearing waterfall.
Right.
So that's the magic.
Well, and let's go take a look at some of the materials that are
Sure.
underneath, or the infrastructure behind this.
Here are the basic components, Casey,
Okay.
that we use in a disappearing waterfall. We'll
So
start.
are these the boxes we're talking about?
Yeah, these are the boxes we're
Okay.
talking about. Let's start at the top
Okay.
though. Here's the weir. That's where the water comes out and runs over this edge down into the pond.
So your pipe hooks
Yep,
to the
you'd
side
hook a
there?
pipe in on the side here
Okay.
on a fitting. Here's the pipe that we'd use, and it would come out, the water would even out on this and overflow and come down. That's one of the reasons you want a weir.
Okay.
If you just ran the tube up here, you'd have a 2-inch fire hose of water squirting out. So we want it to look like a natural waterfall and come across this smooth part.
And
here
can
on the
you
front.
get those in different sizes too?
Yes, they come in
width?
4 different
Okay.
sizes, and we have 2 or 3 different models
Okay.
that you can get to do different things with
All
if you
right.
choose to. All right, they would follow the pipe down. We've got the rubber liner on the ground.
Uh-huh.
It's all laid out. We follow the pipe down till we get down to the bottom. In the bottom are these boxes set up in whatever configuration we need to make the right amount of cubic feet of water.
Okay.
The next item we would put in the hole would be the pump vault. And the pump vault is really nothing more than a manhole.
I was going to
with
say,
a
it kind
cover
of looks
on
like a composting bin.
That's right, exactly. Very similar to that. But we're going to set a pump down in here and hook the pump up through this hole down to the pipe up to the waterfall. So now the water comes in here through these slits in the side and fills this up, keeps the pump covered. That's why we've got to have 3 times as much water.
And so this is next to your boxes. and
That's
stuff,
next to the
right?
boxes
Okay.
down in the basin at the bottom. But if I have to service my pump or I have to replace my pump, I can scrape those rocks aside that we hit it with down there, take the lid off, and I can reach my pump and get it out to do service work on it if necessary. So that's that part of it. One of the things we probably should mention at this point is the size of pump you need
Right.
to run the size of waterfall you want. Many people ask, how come my waterfall doesn't look like yours? It's because ours are running at maximum capacity. For this 25-inch wide waterfall, I would recommend a pump that pumps 5,000 gallons at this point. That means against the pressure of the atmosphere pushing down on it.
Right, and the numbers on pumps are sometimes misleading, I think, because you lose a lot of pressure depending
you do.
on the length of your waterfall and the height of it.
I can think I bought a huge pump
Right.
when it's really not big enough to do what I want it to do.
Right.
Every manufacturer supplies a pump chart, and that chart shows you how much you lose against head pressure. So this pump that I put in here was 3,300 gallons an hour, but at 5 feet, it's only pumping 2,700 gallons an hour. At 10 feet, it's only pumping 1,800.
So you significantly
So
decreased
you,
it right there.
you really lose a lot of power in your pump by the height of your waterfall, the length of the pipe, and the number of fittings that you put in.
So that definitely is how you get the roar, is to make sure you have the right size pump.
That's right. If you want to have 1 inch of water come over the top edge of this, you have to run 200 gallons per hour per inch of width. So
Okay.
25 inches wide, times 200 is 5,000 gallons of water. If you want a quiet waterfall, you could get by with a ½ inch of water, 100 gallons per hour per inch, and have it just pump 2,500 gallons at this point.
Okay.
So this pump would work to make a quiet waterfall.
Okay, all right. So is the pump the biggest price item that it will buy?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay.
You're going to spend $300 or $400 for a good pump to run a waterfall of this size. And the rest of it is probably only going to total up to about that much. So the pump's about half your price, excluding the rocks.
Right, right. Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Mike, for sharing this information. I love this, and I'm ready to play in the water.
Okay, let's go.
Joining us today is Brett Johnson, who's a graduate research assistant and is a graduate student working on his master's in your second year, correct?
That's correct.
In entomology and plant pathology department. And Brett, I mean, so we're amongst your tomato research here. Tell us a little bit about what we're looking at and what you're doing out here.
Well, thank you for having me, Casey.
Yeah.
So what we're studying here is we're studying the effects of different bactericides on the control of bacterial spot of tomato, and we're comparing some of the more conventional and traditionally used copper bactericides with some of the more recently developed biological control agents that are on the market for growers of tomato.
And we all want to protect our tomatoes every summer. I know that's one of our prized produce. So bacterial spot, what are some of the effects that we see on a tomato plant when we're looking at that?
So these plants are not yet infected because we chose a new field that hasn't been recently infected with bacterial spot.
Okay.
But what you will see on the plant, it typically starts in the lower part of the canopy and works its way up. And you'll see these small spots that are usually 1 to 2 millimeters in size that will grow over time, and in really favorable weather conditions with lots of moisture can actually coalesce and create larger spots. But they typically have a yellow halo around the spot that develops, and that's what we call chlorosis.
Okay, and so that'll just work its way up through the foliage of the plant?
Eventually it can defoliate the entire plant, and so it's reducing that capacity of the plant to produce leaf tissue and then therefore produce the fruit that we love to have in our garden.
Gotcha. So you're looking at how to control this problem, this disease.
Right.
So what are some of the treatments that you're using?
So this year we're repeating some treatments that we applied last season, which had mostly to do with different formulations of copper. Okay. Some are OMRI listed, and so can be used by organic gardeners or organic farmers.
Okay.
And we're comparing those with our more conventional copper bactericides like copper hydroxide formulations. And we're also rotating those with some systemic acquired resistance inducers, which are they're used to boost basically the immune system of the plant and help the plant fight off the disease on its own, as well as some biological control agents which consist of either a virus of the bacteria that will attack the bacteria and replicate on the plant, as well as another strain of bacteria, a bacillus, that is antagonistic to the pathogenic bacteria that causes bacterial spot.
So these antagonistic bacterias and bacillus, are they OMRI approved, which means organic growers can use them also?
They are, right? Our biological control agents are OMRI listed and approved, and so this is a way for us to compare what's been used in the past and see if we can make improvements in the future in terms of having comparable control and maybe having products that a wider amount of growers and consumers, will use.
Because I would assume you would still want to rotate your control methods and that sort of stuff, just so you don't build up resistance.
Absolutely, yeah. That's also a consideration, and it's a growing concern in the use of copper as a primary bactericide, because it's already been widely documented that there is resistance in certain isolates of this pathogen to copper.
Okay. So this is your second year to do this trial? Are you
correct? Yeah.
Gleaning any information from last season that you're using towards this season?
Well, last season we had very heavy disease pressure in the field, and although we were able to see differences among treatments, we felt like none of the treatments really adequately controlled the pathogen last season. So we're hoping this season to see those differences again, and we're comparing some of the treatments that we used last season to treatments that are not rotated, and so we're using a single bactericide every week, and trying to kind of parse out why that control wasn't as good as we had hoped it would be.
Excellent. So when will this all be wrapped up with your research?
Should be wrapped up by the end of August, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll stop harvesting and then we'll start looking at the data.
Well, Brett, we look forward to seeing those results. Thank you very much for sharing this research.
Well, thank you very much for being here.
This is pizza with tomatoes and arugula. It's really awesome because you can start with your favorite pizza from your favorite pizza place that you've brought home and make it even better, or you can use it the second day to make the leftover pizza taste better, or you can use it with a frozen pizza, and it always adds to what you start with. So again, it's very easy to do. What I've got is a couple of cups of arugula, and I don't just take the big stems off. You don't have to go to a lot of effort. And to that, I'm going to add about a cup or a cup and a half of cherry tomatoes that I've cut in half. If you've got great tomatoes that are coming out of your garden, go ahead and just cut those into chunks, and you can use those equally well. I'm going to add a little bit, about a half a teaspoon of kosher salt that I'm just going to sprinkle over the top here. And this I'm going to add a little bit less. We can always add more later. So I've added about a half of that, so a fourth of a teaspoon. And then about a fourth of a teaspoon of black pepper. I'm going to do the same thing here because it's always easier to add more. And I'm going to drizzle a teaspoon of vinegar over the top of that. And this can be whatever vinegar you want to showcase, whichever one you have. This one is a sherry vinegar, but you could use a white wine vinegar, red wine vinegar. You could even try a balsamic, although it's going to depend a little bit about what kind of pizza you're using. To that, I'm going to drizzle over a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. And because this is a showcase flavor, you want to use the best one that you have. We're going to toss those around a little bit because we want to get everything coated. Let's see which is the best way for me to toss today. I just want to make sure that everything is coated. This is something you need to do right before you're ready to serve. So make sure that your pizza is hot, it's out, it's ready to serve, because the acid and the oil are going to cause the arugula to break down. Now this is then going to go over the top of your pizza and turn it into one of the better pizzas that you probably have ever had. You can see the arugula is already starting to break down a little bit. So again, you serve it immediately. And if you have people who you think are not going to really enjoy this, serve it on the side. Have them put a piece of pizza on their plate and then put some of this over the top of it. And if they are willing to take a bite with the two things together, I think that alone is going to be enough to convince them that pizza topped with tomatoes and arugula is something they're going to want to try. Let's put a little bit of final touch over it. I've got some shaved Parmesan cheese. Again, the best that you can get, and get it at room temperature also, so that everything kind of melds together. That cheese will give you more flavor if it's room temperature than if you pull it right out of the fridge. This one I think you're going to find useful time after time after time, because pizza is such a popular food, and this just adds to it. I hope you'll give it a try. For Oklahoma Gardening, I'm Barbara Brown.
There are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week, Casey has a plant proven for Oklahoma. We decorate our barn and garden with quilts, and we identify a pest in our pears. We hope you join us then for more TV you'll grow to love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We would like to thank our generous underwriter, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is also provided by Pond Pro Shop, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Oklahoma Horticultural Society, and the Tulsa Garden Club.